Okay, y'all. I know we covered the nervous system or some of the nervous system. I'm gonna go ahead and recap this stuff real quick, and then just kind of move into where we left off. So your nervous system contains two more systems, and that's your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. Your central nervous system consists of your brain and your spinal cord. Your peripheral nervous system consists of a let me make sure 1 second. I'm sorry, you have your central nervous system and then your peripheral nervous system. Your peripheral nervous system further breaks down into your sensory and your motor divisions, and then your motor further breaks down into somatic and autonomic nervous systems, and then your autonomic nervous system breaks down into your sympathetic and parasympathetic. Your peripheral nervous system so it breaks down into your sensory nervous system. Remember, everything is sense, what we feel, so that brings information in via your sensory neurons. Your motor division sends things out. It's your reaction, it's your action by way of efferent pathway, and that takes your action out. Okay, your sensory division further breaks down into your somatic and visceral. That's all you need to know. And then your motor division further breaks down into your somatic motor, which allows for voluntary movements of your skeletal muscles. So your somatic motor system is voluntary. We sense the information, and then when we want to move our arm or our leg or walk, our somatic motor system causes that action, and we are in control of that. Our autonomic motor system, if y'all remember, autonomic is auto, we don't control it, automatic. This provides automatic activities such as controlled blood pressure and heart rate. Now, this further breaks down into your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Now, remember, sympathetic is your fight or flight. Things are going to rise. Your breathing is going to get faster. That means your breathing tube, your bronchioles, your lungs are going to dilate to allow more air to flow in and more CO2 to flow out. Your pupils are going to dilate to allow you to be more aware, to take more information in. Your heart rate is going to go up. Everything's going to go up. Your digestive system is going to shut down almost. It's going to just kind of sit this one out. And then your parasympathetic is going to be your rest and digest. That means when you're at rest, when you're watching Netflix, you just ate a big meal. So now everything is resting. Your breathing is going to slow. Your pupils are going to constrict because you don't need to take in so much. You're starting to relax. You don't need to be so aware. You're comfortable. Your breathing slows because you're relaxed. Your heart rate slows because you're relaxed. Your O2 may even come down just a little bit from 99% to like 97%, because your breathing has slowed, because again, you're relaxed. Your digestive system is going to kick in and start digesting food and doing whatever it does. So your autonomic nervous system, in a way, kind of controls those involuntary things that we don't control, right? So your autonomic nervous system is going to control those involuntary things by way of using the parasympathetic system and your sympathetic system. Because when it needs things to speed up, it's going to stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. When the autonomic nervous system needs our system to relax, it's going to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, let me move on. All right, so we've got different types of cells in the nervous system, right? We've got our neurons. Your neuron consists of three parts. It consists of your cell body, your dendrites, and your axon. Okay. I'm going to try my best to keep up in the book as well for those who like to follow in the book. I know the book is always my favorite. So at this point, we're on page 254 and 255. Okay, so when it comes to your neuron, you've got the cell body. It is the control center of the neuron, And this part controls your nucleus. Your dendrites, which look like the bare branches of a tree, they receive signals from other neurons and conduct the information to the cell body. Some neurons have only one dendrite, others may have a lot of them, okay? But remember, the dendrites bring information in, okay? They bring information into the body. Then the body carries it out to the axon. Your axon, let me go ahead and move to this. So you have your dendrites, right? Remember, they're the eavesdroppers. They go ahead and bring in all the information. They bring it to the body. And then the body continues the action down the axon, okay, to the end of these little bulbs down here, which are usually kind of connected to some sort of organ or muscle or something, okay? Okay. So that's your myelin sheath. This is a Schwann cell. So we know that the Schwann cell has to do with the PNS. So this is a neuron from your peripheral nervous system. Remember that without the neurolemma, the PNS, the Schwann cells, these nerves, they have the neurolemma. This allows regeneration. This is why when this is hurt, it can regenerate. In the central nervous system, they don't have a neurolemma. Without that neurolemma, the central nervous system cannot regenerate. Hence, that's why when they get injured and they're paralyzed for life. Because without that neurolemma, the nerve of the central nervous system cannot regenerate. Okay, so your dendrites bring information in. Your cell body decides whether to keep it going and sends that information down the axon. This is like sending an email, right? We don't get it right away. That's kind of how the nervous system works. We write our email and we push send. That has to hit some sort of tower, right? So these are where we're sending our emails in. We push send, it comes in by way of dendrite. That email hits our cell tower, and then the cell tower sends it out to whoever we needed to send it out to. So you write an email to me. I write an email to Miss Thompson telling her, hey, I'm running late. Go ahead and start head-to-toe assessments. That information is sent through here. It hits a cell tower. That cell tower sends it out to Miss Thompson, and she receives it in her email. Okay. But that's kind of how the nervous system works. So our neurons are classified according to function or direction of impulse. So you have your sensory neurons. Again, they conduct impulses to the spinal cord and brain, also called afferent neurons. Because these sensory neurons bring information in, they're going to arrive, right? It brings information into the spinal cord, up the spinal cord to the brain. Okay, and that's bringing all this information in. That is our sensory. Our motor neurons cause action. Once we feel something and it comes through our nerves to our spinal cord to our brain, the brain makes a decision and says, go ahead and kick into action. It then sends it from the brain down the spinal cord to the effector organ or the effector muscle, the one that we want that action to affect, okay? We then take action. That motor neurons conduct impulses away from the brain and spinal cord to muscles and glands, also called efferent neurons because they go by way of efferent pathway exit. They're going to exit the brain, exit the spinal cord, and they're going to hit the peripheral nervous system, and it's going to cause an action. Our interneurons, we'll go with that. Interneurons conduct impulses from the sensory, I don't know where that came from. From the sensory neuron to the motor neurons, also called central or connecting neurons. Interneurons, connecting neurons, okay? This is a connecting device. This is kind of like that cell tower I was telling y'all about. I'm going to my sensory. I'm going to send my email, right? I'm going to say, hey, Miss Thompson, I'm running late. Go ahead and start head-to-toe assessments. That is the information. I'm sending. It hits the cell tower, which is your interneuron, and it decides what to do, and then it sends the action to Miss Thompson, which is the motor. She gets up, she gets the message, she gets up, and she gets to work. So that causes an action. Okay, I'm just trying to give you an idea of like a three-way. It goes from you feel it, it goes to our brain that makes a decision. That inner neuron connects it, continues, and most of those inner neurons are going to be found in your spinal cord, because it's going to take the message from our nerves, from the senses, up the spinal cord to our brain. Okay, so it's kind of like three pathways: the sensory into the interneuron, and then the interneuron carries the rest of them, carries the message the rest of the way through the spinal cord to the brain. Okay, then when the brain decides what to do, it sends its decision out by way, again, of motor neurons, but it also hits the interneurons as well, where the interneurons then carry it the rest of the way to the rest of the body, causing an action. Okay, so those are our neurons, right? They have dendrites, they have cell bodies, they have an axon. The axon is myelinated. It has a shield around it. That is your myelin sheath. It is Schwann cells for your peripheral nervous system. It is oligodendrocytes for your central nervous system. Your central nervous system consists of your brain and your spinal cord. Your peripheral nervous system consists of your somatic, let me get the other word, somatic and autonomic nervous system. Your somatic motor, we control. It is voluntary. Which is our skeletal muscle. That is about the only thing we control, is our skeletal muscles. And then our autonomic nervous system is involuntary. It controls our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Our sympathetic is our fight or flight, and our parasympathetic is our rest and digest. Now, moving on to our second type of cells in the nervous system is your glial cells. These glial cells are more supportive cells. Support cells bringing the cells of nervous tissue together structurally and functionally. Because remember, cells usually come together to create tissues, okay? So these glial cells are going to hold our neurons together, provide support, provide structure, provide nourishment. They're also going to provide protection, immunity. Structurally and functionally, three main types of connective tissue cells are our astrocytes. They're the star-shaped cells. They anchor small blood vessels to the neurons. They also form the brain-blood barrier. Let me get this together real quick. I'm sorry, y'all, I haven't been, so I'm on page 255. If you look at page 255, you'll see where it's highlighted astrocytes, a word that means star cells. Along with the walls of the blood vessels, astrocyte branches form a two-layer structure called the blood-brain barrier. So our astrocytes create the blood-brain barrier as well. Our microglial cells are small cells that move in inflamed brain tissue, carrying on phagocytosis. So this helps kind of clean up the cells that already have things in them. Maybe a few viruses, bacteria, or something have made it through. Maybe things that we don't need have made it through. So our microglia kicks in with phagocytosis. Remember, phagocytosis is a form of active transport. It uses energy to be able to kill off anything that's dangerous to our body. Then we have oligodendrocytes, which form the myelin sheath on the axons in your central nervous system. Your Schwann cells form the myelin sheath in your peripheral nervous system. I'm not sure if I said it, but if you notice here, this is your oligodendrocyte. These are two different neurons. So your oligodendrocytes actually have extensions, and they can form myelin sheath around multiple neurons, more than one. Our Schwann cells can only myelinate one nerve at a time, one axon at a time. Our oligodendrocytes can myelinate multiple axons at a time. Okay, and then we're saying our microglia cells is more like our our immune support for our nervous system. It helps clean up anything that's dangerous to our neurons. Our astrocytes, if you notice the capillaries inside, that's how it's getting its nutrients and oxygen. And it forms the blood-brain barrier, making any kind of brain diseases, tumors, and things like that harder to cure because it is hard to pass that barrier. All right, disorders of your nervous tissue. Multiple sclerosis. We kind of talked about this. Let me show you. This is your oligodendrocytes, and these are these blue in between. This is multiple axons, right? Axons carry the body away, the information away. But because oligodendrocytes can form myelin sheath on multiple axons, this is normal. The electrical impulses, they sweep through this very easily because the myelin sheath insulates it, okay? Over here with MS, it is an autoimmune disorder because it is our body attacking itself. And here it is attacking the myelin sheath, the oligodendrocytes of your central nervous system. And that's causing the electrical impulses to either be blocked or to be slowed. So that's going to affect muscles that we typically control. It's going to affect our coordination. Eventually, it's going to affect muscles that we don't control. But they look like little dog bites. Okay, we talked about neurofibromatosis. Remember, these are benign tumors arising from your astrocytes. All right, nerves are a bundle of peripheral axons. So remember, our peripheral nervous system is a bundle of axons. I want to make sure. So a bundle of these, if you grab a bundle of them, a whole bunch of axons, to me, they would look like a bunch of balloons that you get for someone's birthday, right? You have a bunch of axons and then you have a bunch of balloons, which will be your cell bodies. But a bunch of these axons in your peripheral nervous system are known as nerves. Okay, your tracts are bundles of central axons. So the same things, the axons, but they're in your central nervous system. Your white matter is brain or cord tissue composed primarily of myelinated axon tracts. Let me see. You know what? And we'll get to the white and gray matter in just a bit when we get to another part of this, okay? But just for now, just know this part as well. Gray matter is brain or cord tissue composed primarily of cell bodies and unmyelinated fibers. Now remember, the cell bodies, like I just showed y'all the picture a minute ago, so imagine like those balloons. Those right there are your gray matter, a bunch of those together. All right, so this is your nerve. I need y'all to know this, okay? Epi is around the whole nerve. Epineurium above epidermis, that is what you see. So it's going to be the most outer. So your epineuron is the most outer connective tissue covering the nerve, okay? And then when you collect a bunch of those, you create fascicles. And then you have the perineurium, that covers the whole fascicle. I'm sorry, at this point I am on page 257. Okay, so 257, if you look at figure 10.6, it says each nerve contains axons bundled into fascicles. So a whole bunch of axons coming together, like we were just talking about the matter. A bunch of axons that are bundled together are called fascicles, and those axons are covered by your perineurium. A connective tissue epineurium wraps the entire nerve. So that's here, right? And then your perineurium surrounds each fascicle, and endoneurium surrounds each axon. Where's your endo? There we go. So here's your axon, and this surrounds the axon, and you see it's kind of like the myelin sheath, and then a bunch of these come together and form a fascicle, and that's covered by your perineum, and then a bunch of axons make one nerve, and that's covered by your epineurium. I'm not supposed to be spending so much time on this, y'all. So fibrous connective tissue. So all of these are made of fibrous connective tissue. Endoneurium surrounds individual fibers. Perineurium surrounds a fascicle of nerve fibers. Your epineurium surrounds the entire nerve. Okay. Reflex arcs. So reflex arcs can contain 2 neurons or 3 neurons, okay? Your 3 neurons is going to be all 3 as far as your sensory neuron, your interneuron, and your motor neuron. Your 2 neuron arcs are going to consist of your sensory and your motor neurons. So nerve impulses are conducted from receptors, so things that receive, to the effectors, meaning the gland or the muscle that we want to take effect on, over neuron pathways or reflex arcs. Conduction by reflex arc results in a reflex. The simplest reflex arcs are 2 neuron arcs consisting of sensory neural synapse in the spinal cord with motor neurons, or 3 neuron arcs consist of sensory, with your interneurons, and then your motor neurons. That's what that one's trying to say. So this is your arc right here, okay? These are your arcs, okay? And this is where you see your gray matter and your white matter. You kind of need to know this, but this is more for information, okay? So in your white matter, up here is going to be your dorsal. This is dorsal, this is dorsal. This is going to be this contains mainly sensory, okay, neurons. And then over here, this white matter contains mostly motor neurons because it's sending information out. And then this information over here contains a mixture, okay? But that's why the different colors, because it consists of different parts of the neuron. Now in here, your gray matter, give me 1 second. Make sure. Okay. So this is your gray matter, right? Now this is your arc, okay? And okay, I'm going to try to explain this. So for your 3 motor pathways, right? And actually I have a picture I want to show y'all. Let me see if I can get it real quick. This might be easier, this picture. Let's see, how do I do this? Yeah. Okay, here. So this is your reflex arc, right? So we feel something. This is pain right here. Your sensory receptors feel it. All this comes in your afferent pathway because it's bringing the information in. If you notice, these are neurons. These are dendrites. This is the body. This is the axon carrying and these are your axon knobs, right? Or synaptic knobs at the end. And you see more dendrites receive the information carried to the cell body. Now, this is your motor. So this is your reflex arc, just like I was saying, these 2 right here, right? Oh, how do I make it big again? There we go. So we feel the stimulus, whether it be cold, pain, heat, whatever we sense, brings it in by way of sensory receptors or by way of your afferent pathway. And see, this is myelinated. It's carrying the electrical impulse all the way through. It's carrying it to this dendrite, which is your sensory. This is your sensory. This is your interneuron. This is going to, so you see how it's connecting your sensory to your motor. So your interneuron, then the dendrites bring it to the body brings it to the brain. And so it carries the signal the rest of the way. The brain makes a decision and sends that information back out. This then carries the action here, meaning remove your hand because we touched it. It sent that information that said, ouch, that hurt. So this carries us here. This says, hey, move your hand. This brings it back, sends the information to a motor neuron, right? To a motor neuron The dendrites the body and it sends it out the axon. You see this is myelination. Your peripheral nervous system, right? Nope, let me not say that. Your motor, you see, is myelinated. It brings the action to the muscle. The muscle then, and the action was move your hand. Again, this is skeletal muscle that we control, is voluntary. It is your effector organ. So we were able to say, hey, move your hand. So your sensory neuron, your interneuron, your motor neuron. I hope that helped a little bit. I thought this picture would be easy, but this is your effector organ, okay? Because that's the organ we want to affect. We want to move our hand from the cactus, from the pain. That's not it. Okay. Now, by way of your two, right? I said there was a three neuron pathway or two neuron pathway. That's kind of what I was talking about the other day, the two pathway. The two neuron pathway, if you notice, it's only a sensory and motor. There's no interneuron. That's because that's that quick reflex I was talking about. When we feel a stimulus that we kind of, our brain's kind of expecting it, but our muscles aren't, it's kind of like going haywire, right? Because we know what's coming. We don't know when, and we know the feeling, but our body is just, okay. So it's almost like going haywire. So it hits our knee, right? It hits the ligament, which causes a reaction. Again, the reaction is so quick, our body kicks into survival mode. And what it does is bounce that quick signal, the sensory bounces it to our spinal cord, and the spinal cord automatically has a reaction. Almost like, nope, let me not say that. It kind of has a quick reaction. It doesn't carry that signal to the brain. It skips the brain. So we feel that quick jerk. Our body kicks into survival mode. The spinal cord says, sorry, brain, I got to make this decision. This is kind of a life or death situation. And it kicks out a reaction, making our leg jump. Kind of like, hey, get off me. So that's our two-way pathway. But that's basically what this says. Okay, nerve impulses, self-propagating wave of electrical disturbance that travels along the surface of a neural membrane, often called an action potential. So, our action potentials is kind of like this in waiting. It's resting. It has potential to react. As soon as it reacts, it is now in action potential. Okay, so it's resting. Or let me start this. Even though, and I said this last time, even though we send signals by way of releasing chemicals, and what we show to y'all appears like it's releasing real slow, but those neurotransmitters are releasing at a super fast rate. And when they are released, they cause an electrical impulse to go to the next neuron. If you look at page, let me get it together. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the book. So at this point, we would be on page 259. No, you know what? Let's just go in order because we're about to get there. Okay. So we talked about this the other day, right? Polarized is when it's resting. You have potassium on the inside, sodium on the outside. It's I don't want to say it's an equal charge on each side because it's more positive on the outside and more negative on the inside, but it's kind of pulling at an even rate, almost pulling at each other because you have negative, positive. Okay, once the action potential kicks in, once it's kind of stimulated, when we need an action going, and those neurotransmitters are released, causing electrical impulses, this is depolarization. That means the membrane, all those ion channels, those sodium ion channels, they open up, and this is the membrane is depolarized, and they're opening up, and the sodium is flowing in. And I made a mistake the other day, so let me fix this. The sodium flows in first, so the sodium the protein channels that open up, remember sodium usually that's in sodium, and it also has to release potassium because it's trying to even out the negative and the positive. So we don't want a whole bunch of negative with a positive is what it's kind of showing here, right? So the ions, the protein channels are going to open up to allow the sodium to flow in first. And then once the sodium flows in quickly, the other protein channels will open up and the potassium will flow out. But this is your depolarization. Your repolarization is when your channels open up and your sodium starts to flow back out, and then your potassium flows back in, and now we're at back to a polarized state, which is a resting state. At rest, the neuron's membrane is slightly positive on the outside, which is polarized. From a slight excess of positive on the outside, a stimulus triggers the opening of sodium channels, and this allows them to flow in. Inward movement of sodium depolarizes the membrane, making the inside more positive than the outside. Positive means go, right? So we almost turn it on, meaning a message is being sent, because we need all that positive to flow on the inside to keep that message going. It's almost like positive is on and negative is off. The stimulated section of membrane immediately repolarizes, but by that time the depolarization has already triggered the next section of membrane, and so on and so on. So propagating a wave of electrical disturbances all the way down. So in this picture, this is also on page 260. So you kind of see how it opens up, positive flows in, negative flows out. But as it's passing, then they are going back to what they were. Negative is coming back in like it's supposed to, and positive is going out like it's supposed to. Okay. Now remember this myelin sheath it's a fatty layer, it's a lipid layer, okay? It assists with insulation of the nerve, it assists with electrical impulses so that it'll speed a lot quicker. Some signals move directly along the nerve, some majority use the myelin sheath to help move it a lot faster, okay? When it moves so fast that it's gliding across the top and jumping to the nodes of Ranvier, which are the dents in between, this is called your saltatory conduction. Okay, the place where impulses are transmitted from one neuron to another synapse. So you got your synaptic knob, which is this area right here. You've got your plasma membrane, which is, remember, it's a double layer, if y'all remember in the first place. Oh man. If y'all remember when we first learned about the plasma membrane, it is a bilayer phospholipid, right? Phospholipid bilayer membrane. So you can see how it's double here as well. Okay, y'all need to consider that the cell that we went through in chapter 3, that's just a basic component. Cells are built differently. Your axon, your neuron all have a plasma membrane. This is your plasma membrane. It's just built differently, and that's why that's that negative and positive on the inside and the outside. Same in your, just real quick, but same in your osteocytes. Your osteocytes that sit in your lacunae, they have extensions and they connect to each other, but they have a membrane. Your osteoblasts have a membrane. Your osteoclasts have a membrane. They have nuclei. Same in our muscle fibers, right? They have a plasma membrane. They're just different names, but they all have the same basic components, that cytoplasm, that membrane, and that nuclei. Okay, so that's kind of how y'all need to look at all of these cells, okay? So our plasma membrane. Okay, so we have our synaptic knob, which is the end. We have our synaptic cleft, which is the space in between that our neurotransmitters are released in between, right? And then we have our plasma membrane, okay? So action potential conducted along the axon reaches the axon knob. So our motor has been sent out, or our sensory is coming in, but I'm going to use motor. It's a bit easier to understand. So our motor has been sent out, our action, our brain told us to do something. So these neurotransmitters are now secreted inside little vesicles or little vehicles. And when they get to the plasma, the end of the plasma membrane, they fuse and open up. Fusing means they basically melt into the plasma membrane. And the other side of the plasma membrane opens up to allow the neurotransmitters out. These neurotransmitters will find their ways into the channels, which are called receptors, allowing that message to continue on to the next neuron or to the effector organ or muscle that we want. These are your ion channels. These are your neural. Okay. So action potential triggers release of neurotransmitters from your vehicles. Your neurotransmitters cross your synaptic cleft and bind to your post. Remember, post is after. This is what's receiving. Receptors. Activated receptors trigger opening of ion channels, initiating a postsynaptic impulse, meaning because this is synaptic cleft, the after synaptic space impulse, meaning continuing that impulse, continuing that message. All right, you have different neurotransmitters. You have acetylcholine, catecholamines, which is your norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, your endorphins, your enkephalins. Ooh, I wish I were here to pronounce that. Your nitric oxide and other compounds. For now, you need to know your Parkinson's is characterized by low levels of dopamine. Dopamine is involved in, let me get to the right page, y'all. 264, I believe. So 264. Okay, your dopamine is involved in controlling muscle movement and your coordination. And so if characterized by abnormally low levels of dopamine in motor control areas, meaning motor is my action, right? So areas of the brain, patients usually exhibit involuntary trembling and muscle rigidity. Because we have low amounts of dopamine, our signals are not being sent the way they should, because the dopamine causes the electrical impulse to keep going. But if I don't have enough, say that I need 100 to keep it going at regular speed, but now I have 50, so now it's not going to go at 100 miles an hour, it's going to go at 20 miles an hour because I have so much less. So my muscle, me controlling, is going to be very low. It's going to be slowed. All right, now learning my central nervous system. One thing I want to say real quick, what I need y'all to kind of open your minds and realize that these nerves here are really a bunch of neurons. Okay, they're neurons, they're axons, their bodies. They're even though they look like that, they're neurons, and they're not attached. They have that little space in between, right? Like that. But if you can picture a bunch of those, that's kind of what these are. They're not just well, some of them are. One of them is a long axon, right? But the rest of them are, they're all motor neurons. I'm sorry, they're all neurons. Sensory neurons, motor neurons, and here you got your interneurons. Okay, I skipped it. So divisions of the brain, you got your brainstem, consists of 3 parts named in ascending. So let me find the right page. Okay, so looking at our brainstem. I want to make sure I covered all the neurons and everything because I don't want to have to go. Okay, y'all. Dendrites, they bring in information, body, neurons, axons carry it out. Sensory brings information in. Interneurons connect sensory motor neurons. Your motor is your action. We talked about the nerve, the covering of the nerve. We talked about the reflex arc, the two-way and the three-way. Okay, just making sure I covered all my bases, y'all. Okay, so divisions of my brain. We got our brain stem, right? If we're moving, thought we had a better picture. Okay, so if we're moving from the top to the bottom, we're looking at our brain stem. Trying to find my picture. Okay. I thought we had better pictures, y'all. Okay, here we go. So, starting with our brain stem, okay, which is here. Oh, where is it at? Okay, which is here, okay. This consists of your midbrain, your pons, and your medulla oblongata. Okay, your medulla oblongata, it consists of some control centers, okay? I'm trying to remember the word. Your respiratory centers, and I believe it has your heart centers. Trying to remember. I think it has 2 respiratory centers in your medulla oblongata. So that's going to be what controls kind of what your heart rate and your breathing is, your medulla oblongata. Oh, yeah. And that's part of your brainstem. So your brainstem consists of your midbrain, your pons, and your medulla. Let me go back up and make sure I'm reading it. Okay, all 3 parts of brainstem are two-way conduction paths, meaning they have sensory and motor tracks. Your gray matter areas in the brainstem function as important reflex centers. Now remember your reflex arc, right? They consist of 2 pathways or 3 pathways, and that's your gray matter. But is that all? Okay. On page 264, I just kind of want y'all to know the medulla oblongata, this is under the brainstem, second paragraph, is enlarged upward extension of the spinal cord. It lies just inside the cranial cavity above the large hole in the occipital bone called foramen. You got the pons, which bulge out a bit more than the medulla. And then you got the midbrain. You know what, honestly, I thought it was going to go... Many important reflex centers in the brainstem. The cardiac, the respiratory, and the vasomotor centers are located in your medulla oblongata. In your brainstem. This is over on page 265, the left column. It says all 3 parts of the brainstem function as two-way conduction paths, sensory fibers, and then many important reflex centers lie in the brainstem. The cardiac, your respiratory, and your vasomotor. But your medulla oblongata is where your respiratory centers lie. Okay, you got the cerebellum, which is the second largest part of the human brain. It helps control muscle contractions to produce coordinated movements, so we can maintain balance, move smoothly, and sustain normal posture. Looking in your book on page 265. Nope, I think that covers everything. Moving on to your diencephalon. Medulla oblongata. Where's my diencephalon? My cerebrum. Cerebellum. Okay, diencephalon. It's the purple. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just trying to make sure that I have everything. Okay. Structure and function of, so, so where do I see it? Diencephalon, page 265. The diencephalon is a small but important part of the brain, located between the midbrain and the brain stem below and the cerebrum above. It consists of three major structures: the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the pineal gland. The thalamus, the hypothalamus. I see. Okay, consists mainly of structure and function of the hypothalamus. It consists mainly of the posterior pituitary gland, pituitary stalk, gray matter. We went through this, y'all. Acts as the major center for controlling the autonomic nervous system. So your hypothalamus, which lies in your diencephalon, acts as the major center for controlling your autonomic nervous system. We know the autonomic nervous system also controls your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. Therefore, helps control the function of most internal organs. It controls hormone secretion by anterior and posterior pituitary glands. Therefore, it indirectly helps control hormone secretion by other endocrine glands. This is your hypothalamus. Structure and function of your thalamus. Now your hypothalamus, meaning hypo is below, thalamus below the thalamus. Dumbbell-shaped mass of gray matter. Gray matter. Go back and look up gray matter. Extending toward each cerebral hemisphere. Hemi breaks things into left and right. Okay. Hemisphere relays sensory impulses to cerebral cortex sensory, meaning this brings in sensory, brings in things it brings in information to your cerebral cortex. In some way produces emotions of pleasantness and unpleasantness. Your cerebrum is your largest part of the human brain. Your cerebellum is the second largest part. The outer layer of gray matter is your cerebral cortex, made up of lobes, composed mainly of dendrites. Remember, dendrites are all those ones that bring information in, and cell bodies of your neurons. Okay, interior of the cerebrum, composed mainly of white matter, which is nerve fibers arranged in bundles called tracts. Tracts are bundles of axons. Functions of cerebrum is mental processes of all types. Okay, brain disorders, damage to brain tissue. Your CVA, hemorrhage from or cessation of blood flow through cerebral blood vessels, is known as a stroke. Okay, so now remember, when there's pressure in our brain, is damaging parts of the brain, is damaging that gray matter, is damaging that white matter, meaning it's damaging the neurons, the dendrites, the bodies, the axons. Okay. The cerebrovascular accident, vascular, tells you that this has to do with our vessels, our arteries, and our veins, right? But if you see that if this were to pop and blood were to spread out, yes, it's a vascular issue, a blood issue, but it's putting pressure on our neurons, which is now going to cause it to be a neural issue as well. And when it pushes on those bodies and those dendrites and those axons, well, then the sensory information doesn't come in, the motor information doesn't go out. And now our muscles are affected, and now our organs are affected and not working properly. And now they're just malfunctioning because we got this fluid pushing pressure on areas of the brain, causing it to kind of go haywire. So we need to kind of start seeing how things are going to affect other parts of the body, right? Okay, so Real quick, CVA, hemorrhage, meaning loss of blood. Maybe a vessel popped and blood is hemorrhaging from the vessel. That's causing fluid buildup in my brain because my skull can only hold so much. And now because it's filling up, and that blood has nowhere to go, it's putting pressure on my brain. It's pushing fluid into my brain tissues. Which is now causing swelling of the brain as well, okay? Or there's going to be a cessation, meaning my vessel is going to be small and now no blood is going to get through. If no blood gets through, my brain tissue and my neurons, my dendrites, my bodies, my axons, they don't get any blood flow. They don't get any oxygen. The two things our brain needs is oxygen and sugar. And it's not getting no sugar and it's not getting no oxygen. So that's also going to cause our neurons to go haywire because they literally will start to die within seconds. Okay, they will start to go haywire within seconds without oxygen, without nutrition. Cerebral palsy is a condition in which damage to motor control areas of the brain before, during, or shortly after birth causes paralysis of one or more limbs. I'm not even going to go there. Cerebral palsy. You usually are diagnosed with it at birth because it usually happens during birth or usually during. But that is a lack of oxygen to the brain. Anoxia, Anoxia, that is lack of oxygen to the brain. And that's what happens in cerebral palsy. So again, now our neurons are affected. And if our neurons are affected, the messages are not being carried correctly to our muscles. And our muscles just kind of start growing how they want and doing what they want. Or, nope, let me not say that. But our muscles are motor. Our action areas of the brain are damaged, meaning our muscles are going to be affected. We can't really control them. It's the action going out. Don't, you know what? I haven't even looked it up if they're sensory, which I'm sure, but if all their sensory neurons are affected because they can probably feel everything, but they can't control the movement, the action. All right, degenerative disease. We went through these. Dementia syndrome, that includes progressive loss of memory, Alzheimer. Miss Thompson went through that. Huntington disease is an inherited disorder. So you get that. Alzheimer's, they're not sure if it's inherited. Huntington disease is inherited. It is a specific gene that causes Huntington disease. And actually lately here, they have figured out which gene it is. And so now they're trying to find some sort of cure or remission to assist with people with Huntington disease. Because from what I heard, they usually are dying by the age of 55. Inherited disorder characterized by chorea of progressing to severe dementia. HIV can infect neurons and thus cause dementia as well. What did I do, y'all? Seizure disorders. So remember, our neurons send messages by way of electrical impulses. But we have to have a regular, constant flow of those electrical impulses. We can't have it going haywire, right? Like a plug. When we plug it in, it has the insulation on the outside that we can touch. Once we turn it on, the cords on the inside carry that electrical impulse from the wall to my curling iron, and now my curling iron has power, right? The electricity in the wall is telling my curling iron turn on. So that's kind of how our neurons work. It's telling our muscles move. It's telling our organs digest. It's telling my brain think. And in seizures, this is a sudden burst of abnormal neuron activity that results in temporary changes in my brain function. But because these electrical impulses are going haywire, I can't really control them. And that's going to mess with my brain function. And if my brain is not functioning properly, the rest of my body is not. I cannot control it. Epilepsy is many forms, all characterized by recurrent seizures, meaning they just have seizures. It's not just a one-time thing, a fever thing. It's They have seizures majority of the time for the rest of their lives. That's all you need to know about that. An EEG is how they kind of read the intensity of your seizures and how many you have when you sleep, when you're awake, and so on. They glue all these things to your head, like literally in your scalp. And this is usually what they call a sleep study. And they kind of measure when you have seizures. All right. Your spinal cord, columns of white matter composed of bundles of myelinated nerve fibers, meaning bundles of axons. From the outer portion of the H-shaped core of the spinal cord, bundles of axons called tracts. Now, in the spinal cord, because that is part of your central nervous system, that's called tracts. Interior is composed of gray matter, which is made up mainly of neuron dendrites and cell bodies. Spinal cord tracts, we've kind of went through this, so don't let this confuse you. Spinal cord tracts provide two-way conduction paths. Remember, sensory, motor, ascending, descending. Ascending is coming up, descending is coming down. Ascending up, descending down. So right now we're talking about the spinal cord itself, not the fibers coming out, okay? Your peripheral nervous system has afferent pathways, which brings sensory information in to my spinal cord, and efferent pathway, which brings information from my spinal cord out for an action. In my spinal cord, when we bring the information in, when peripheral sensory neurons bring the information into my spinal cord, that message moves ascending up to my brain. When my brain makes a decision and says, okay, tell the hand to move, that electrical impulse goes by way of descending down the spinal cord and then to my hand by way of efferent pathway. Spinal cord functions as the primary center for all spinal cord reflexes. Sensory tracts conduct impulses to the brain, and motor tracts conduct impulses from the brain. All right, here's that arc again, right? This is your gray matter, which we said was what? Neuron dendrites and cell bodies. Okay, but real quick, this is your dorsal ganglion root. This is your ventral, okay? You're right here, okay? I'm trying to connect this to this. So if we were to cut transverse, right? If we were to cut transverse and then look down this way, this is what we would see, okay? This whole thing right here. So there's two. You can only see one, but there's two, and they come around and meet, and that's where this is right here, okay? But this right here is these right here. This is this ball right here, but there's two. So one more time, if we were to cut this transverse and look down, this is what we would see with these two here. This is mainly sensory, okay? Again, from your sensory, from your peripheral nervous system, it brings information in. We feel something painful, it brings it here to the dorsal ganglion root, which is sensory neurons. It brings it in here. It hits our reflex arc, which we saw in the other picture, arc. It hits the interneuron, which sends the information up the ascending path to the brain. The brain makes a decision, comes down the descending pathway, then comes again to the interneuron, to our motor, to our ventral root, and then carries the action out. If an injury cuts the cord across, impulses can no longer pass to and from the brain. Anesthesia, loss of sensation, paralysis, loss of ability to make voluntary movements. All right, moving on to let me find the page. I'm sorry, y'all, real quick. Moving back to page 269, 268. On page 268, you're going to see parts of the brain. You need to know these parts of the brain, okay? Your frontal, your temporal, your lateral, your occipital, and your parietal. It kind of matches your bones, right? You need to know the central sulcus. You need to know our Broca's area. Our Broca's area affects your motor speech, okay? So this means I'm going to have difficulty talking. It's going to be hard for me to be able to talk because that's my action. It's also going to be hard for me to understand the languages because, again, that's my action. I'm trying to, I'm taking in the information, but that interneuron and that motor neuron is having a hard time connecting and getting that action out. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to miss that. Yeah. Moving on to page. Make sure I hit everything. All right, moving on to page 274. We're looking at the meninges. Coverings, cranial bones and vertebrae, cerebral. So our cranial bones, right? Our brain sits inside of to protect it. Our vertebrae, our spinal cord sits inside all those vertebrae bones. Cerebral and spinal meninges are tough fluid cushion membranes. You have the dura mater, which is the outermost layer. You have the arachnoid mater. Then you have the pia mater. Then you have the fluid spaces. You have subarachnoid spaces of the meninges. You have central canal inside cord. You have ventricles in the brain. Different ventricles. We have 4 different ventricles, okay? You have fluid, which is called cerebral spinal fluid. Excuse me, y'all. Okay, these are our ventricles, these blue, okay? These are fluid-filled spaces. I'm sorry, let me not say that. You have third ventricle. You have 2 lateral ventricles, okay? And then you have a third ventricle and a fourth ventricle. But these are our laterals, okay? Now the flow of cerebral fluid, I'm going to... If you look into our book, 274, under meninges and bone, I'm going to read these real quick. The outer, you have your dura mater, which is a tough outer layer. It lines the vertebral column. So your dura mater is going to line, you see out here, is lining our spinal column or spinal cord. It's providing a cushion for it, okay? Then you have the pia mater, which is the tough lines vertebral. Okay, the pia mater, which is the innermost membrane covering of the spinal cord itself. And then you have the arachnoid mater, which is the membrane between the dura and the pia. Dura, dura, arachnoid mater. You have a subarachnoid space. This space is a cavity, and that contains your cerebrospinal fluid. You can kind of see the arrows right there, okay? But that contains your cerebrospinal fluid sits in your subarachnoid space. Sub is below arachnoid, your arachnoid mater, and then you have your pia. So moving from outside to in is DAP, dura, arachnoid, pia. Now talking about cerebrospinal fluid. Moving on to page 275 under cerebrospinal fluid, spaces. CSF also fills spaces in the brain called cerebral ventricles. You need to know that your choroid plexus is, you have what we call a choroid plexus right here, okay, which is a network. This is what makes the cerebrospinal fluid, and you have a choroid plexus in every ventricle, in both laterals, in your third and your fourth ventricle, and each one adds cerebrospinal fluid to help cushion your brain and your spinal cord to hopefully keep it protected from injury. You move from your CSF is one of the body's circulating fluids. It seeps from the lateral ventricles into your third ventricle, flows down through your cerebral aqueduct into your fourth ventricle. Most of your CSF moves through tiny openings from the fourth ventricle into the subarachnoid space near the cerebellum. So here, lateral, where are we at? Okay, so your cerebral spinal fluid goes from your lateral ventricles. This is the lateral part. Lateral ventricles into your third ventricle. Where is my fourth ventricle? Choroid plexus of your lateral. So your lateral, right, contains cerebral spinal fluid. It then travels this way, this way, this way. It's going to travel this way. It's going to come and you see some of it is going to go that way and that way, and this way, and then it comes up and it's traveling, and it's fluid that's protecting your brain. But you see, eventually it's going into my veins, so that eventually it's going to be emptied into my into the rest of my body, where my body gets rid of it. Remembering that this fluid forms continuously from blood, circulates, and is resorbed into blood can be useful in understanding certain conditions. Okay, we're going to leave it at that. Hydrocephalus. Hydro is water or fluid, okay? Looking on page 275, other conditions can cause an accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid in the ventricles. An example is hydrocephalus, or water on the brain. One form of treatment involves surgical placement of a hollow tube. So this is a collection of cerebrospinal fluid. It's not excreting correctly. It's not draining correctly. The spinal fluid starts to build up. And in that case, they need to put a tube, which is called a VP shunt. You'll see it right here. A VP shunt, what they do is put a hollow tube so that the fluid can drain. But nowadays, where they're putting it, or at least the kids that I've worked with, it's going down into the chest, into your peri-area cavity, where it drains into your somewhere in your intestines or your stomach, or somewhere in that area where the body can get rid of it. Okay. Peripheral nervous system. Cranial nerves. You have 12 pairs attached to the undersurface of the brain. Now, the difference with these is that your cranial nerves actually come off your brain. Okay. Your peripheral nerves come off your spinal cord, right? And that's why it's your peripheral nervous system. Now, these actually branch off from a part in the brain. I'm going to read on page 276. 12 pairs of cranial nerves emerge from the undersurface of the brain. It shows the attachments of these nerves to the brainstem and diencephalon. Their fibers conduct impulses between the brain and surfaces in the head and the neck, and in the thoracic and abdominal cavities. What I need you to know is your cranial nerves controls mostly your head and your neck, along with other areas, but mainly your head and your neck, okay? Meaning your eyes, your ears, your shrugs of your shoulders, your tongue. But there's a table on page 277, table 10.2. So something like your facial nerve. This is a nerve that usually causes Bell palsy. It gets inflamed. Your impulses from your taste buds of tongue to the brain, from brain to the face and muscles. The sense of taste, contraction of muscles, or facial expression. Your cranial nerves contain sensory and motor neurons. And then again, they mostly control your head and neck, along with some other things, okay? So make sure you just know these, right? I automatically know facial nerve 7. I automatically know cranial nerve 7 is your facial nerve, just because I had the Bell's palsy, but like your vestibulocochlear, ooh, is going to be cranial nerve 8. Vagus is cranial nerve 10. One is olfactory. I had to memorize those in school, and I remember going through them when I got that test. Olfactory, optic, ocular, motor. TT, trochlear, trigeminal. Abducens, facial. I just knew facial because I had that a couple months before I started nursing school. The last of them were kind of hard, but I had to come up with something I can't remember. But I remember TT. Actually, I think I did TTAF. And then the rest of them, I'm not sure. But make sure you know those. All right, a lumbar puncture is a spinal tap. It is the withdrawal of some of your cerebrospinal fluid from the subarachnoid space. Again, my subarachnoid space is below your arachnoid layer, and this is where your CSF is housed. You usually will sit in a fetal position on your lateral, left or right lateral side in a fetal position. They will go into your lumbar space, which is, remember, your lower back. And they'll draw some fluid. CSF is used to reduce pressure from swelling after injury or disease, or is analyzed for diagnosis. So if we have too much buildup, quickly they'll try and remove that before placing some sort of shunt, or maybe the shunt is malfunctioning, and they need to relieve pressure quickly. They'll also test this for meningitis. Okay. Usually with adults, they will get headaches after a lumbar puncture. And I believe, I could be wrong, I need to look it up, but I believe we put them in Trendelenburg because for adults, they'll usually always get headaches after a lumbar puncture. For children, they seem to be okay. They don't seem to be in any pain when they have to get a lumbar puncture. There's your cranial nerves. All right, spinal nerves. You have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. They emerge from the spinal cord. You have 8 pairs that attach to the cervical. Cervical is the very top part right around your neck. 12 pairs attached to your thoracic, so that's your chest area. 5 pairs attached to the lumbar, that's the lower back. 4 to the sacrospinal, that's the very lower back. 1 pair attaches to the coccyx, that's almost going under into your bum. After exiting the spinal cord, some nerve fibers from several spinal nerves braid together in a single peripheral nerve called a plexus. This is a bundle of nerves. So my functions of my spinal nerves are conduct impulses between the spinal cord and parts of the body not supplied by my cranial nerves. We kind of went through this. They contain sensory and motor fibers, right? And they come off the spinal cord. You kind of got to look at it as two separate systems that they are, CNS and PNS. So your PNS has, right, it brings information in. It brings information in, but you have mainly, not all, but you have mainly interneurons in your spinal cord and your brain, because that's the connection between your sensory and your motor. But it brings information in and takes information out. And your spinal cord and your brain has those interneurons, which is kind of connecting and making decisions. Contain sensory motor fibers. Skin surface areas that are supplied by a single spinal nerve are dermatomes. Skin surface areas that are supplied by a single spinal nerve are dermatomes. Nerve C1, nerve C2, nerve C3, nerve C4. You're going to really need these dermatomes when you, if you decide to work in neuro or nerve injury areas. Peripheral nerve disorders, neuritis, itis, inflammation of your nerve. General term referring to nerve inflammation. Ooh, my pen, y'all. Sciatica is inflammation of the sciatic nerve that innervates the legs. Neuralgia or muscle pain often accompanies neuritis. Trigeminal neuralgia is recurrent episodes of stabbing pain along one or more branches of your trigeminal nerve in the head. Your trigeminal is your fifth cranial nerve. Bell's palsy, Bell palsy, paralysis of facial features resulting from damage to the facial nerve, your seventh cranial nerve. Herpes zosters or shingles, viral infection caused by chickenpox virus that has invaded the dorsal root ganglion. Remember that dorsal root. When we cut the spinal cord and we were looking down, I said we have that dorsal root and that ventral. The dorsal is the sensory, which brings information in around that arc and remains dormant until an episode of shingles usually affects a single dermatome, producing characteristic painful plaques or vesicles. All right, my autonomic nervous system contains mostly, let me not say that, motor neurons that conduct impulses from your central nervous system to the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glandular epithelial tissue. Remember, smooth muscle we do not control. It is involuntary, meaning it is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. Smooth muscle, glandular epithelial tissue. We haven't learned glands yet. That's the endocrine system. But when they say glandular epithelial tissue, our glands are made of epithelial tissue. Regulates body's automatic or involuntary functions. Autonomic neurons are your preganglionic autonomic neurons. They conduct from the spinal cord or the brainstem to an autonomic ganglion. Woo. Postganglionic neurons conduct from autonomic ganglion. Okay. Just understand that your autonomic nervous system, again, controls your cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and your glands. Okay. It regulates your body's automatic or involuntary functions. Again, those things that we don't control. Autonomic neurons. Okay. Right here. Parasympathetic. Your parasympathetic is going to constrict your pupils because we don't need to be so aware. We're relaxed. It's going to secrete saliva because it's digestion. Remember, rest and digest. When we're ready to eat or when we're hungry or when we're just digesting, we're creating more saliva to assist with that breakdown. We're going to constrict our bronchioles because we don't need to take very fast, deep breaths. We're relaxed. It's going to slow down our heartbeat. Our tissues don't need as much oxygen because we're relaxed. We're not using so much energy. Increase secretion in our digestive system because, again, rest and digest is going to digest the food. Increase motility, meaning, again, digestive system. Things are going to move and we're going to get ready to go to the bathroom. We're going to empty our colon. We're going to empty our bladder. Things are going to relax. In your sympathetic, eyes are going to dilate so we can be more aware and take things in. Where secretion in our mouths has to do with digestion. Digestion stops. So we stop secretion. We decrease secretion in here as well. We decrease motility, meaning nothing's moving. We're going to hold in our contents in our bladder and in our colon. And all that's going to kind of shut down. Okay. We're going to dilate our bronchioles because we're breathing fast. We're taking, or we need to take in more air. We're using energy. We're going to speed up our heartbeat because, again, we're either using energy. Well, we're using energy. We're in a hyped up situation. We're going to secrete adrenaline. We're going to, everything's going to speed up. You kind of make sure y'all know these, okay? Autonomic or visceral effectors, tissues to which autonomic neurons conduct impulses. Remember, your effector, the organ we want to affect, the gland we want to affect, the muscle we want to affect, that we don't control. We don't control cardiac muscle. We don't control smooth muscle. We don't control our glands. Composed of two divisions, which is your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. So again, this kind of tells you the arc, right? Your dorsal brings in information and your ventral takes the action out. But these are ways that things that we're not controlling. Sympathetic dendrites and cell bodies of the sympathetic are located in gray matter. Axons lead spinal cord. Okay, don't worry about it. Just function. Sympathetic serves as the emergency or stress system controlling visceral effectors. Okay. During anger, fear, hate, or anxiety, group of changes induced by sympathetic control is called your fight or flight. Your parasympathetic dominates control of many visceral effectors under normal everyday conditions, counterbalances sympathetic function. They are what's keeping your autonomic nervous system. They are what's keeping your autonomic nervous system at homeostatic, at balance. Okay, you can think of this kind of as a way of keeping homeostasis as well. If one slows things down and one speeds things up, they're constantly trying to keep things in balance. All right, now remember, neurotransmitters are neurons. The way they send impulses is by neurotransmitters. We have cholinergic fibers, our preganglionic axons. So our axon that's going to send the message are pre of parasympathetic and sympathetic systems and parasympathetic postganglionic axons. Cholinergic, no, let me not say that. Adrenergic, cholinergic fibers, you need to understand that cholinergic fibers work with acetylcholine. That's what I need you to know. Adrenergic fibers work with norepinephrine. Or noradrenaline. Autonomic nervous system as a whole. So your autonomic nervous system consists of parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. And remember, they're trying to keep things in homeostasis. Regulates the body's automatic functions in ways that maintain or quickly restore homeostasis. Many visceral effectors are doubly innervated, meaning they receive fibers from parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions and are influenced in opposite ways by two divisions, meaning I have an axon from the parasympathetic and an axon from the sympathetic, and whenever it needs it to speed up, the sympathetic is going to affect it, and when it needs it to slow down, your parasympathetic is going to affect it. Okay. Stress-induced disease. Prolonged or excessive response to stress can disrupt normal functioning throughout the body. Examples of stress-induced conditions include heart disease, digestive problems, and reduced resistance to disease. Let me find this in your book. Okay, make sure you'll read this, okay? On page 285, you'll see where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, heart disease, digestive, reduced resistance to disease, and spread of cancer. Neuroblastoma. This is also on page 285, is a malignant tumor of the sympathetic division. So a tumor, something that's going to grow, right, and overgrow the cells in my sympathetic division, meaning it's affecting my sympathetic nervous system. It most often occurs in developing nervous systems of young children and metastasizes rapidly to other parts of the body. Symptoms often include exaggerated or inappropriate sympathetic effects, including increased heart rate, sweating, and high blood pressure. I think that's it, yeah. Okay, I know we have another chapter, but I'm going to have to do that one tomorrow, okay? Meninges, coordination, your cerebellum, your action potential. Okay, I think that's it.